Good morning and welcome to another Zepto Connect webinar session. It's I think this is our 11th time we've brought this to market. So it's great to see you all online virtually. By way of introduction, I'm Chris Jewell, CEO, co-founder of Zepto. And it's great, to be here today. But before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands here in northern New South Wales, the Bundjalung people, and extend that acknowledgement and respect to the traditional owners of the lands that you are all joining from today. Now, as is typically the way we do this here, just a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. You'll all notice the top right of your screen, there is a little chat box there. The chat's there for you to engage throughout the session, which is great. Underneath that chat room is a Q&A. So if there are any questions, please fire them away. In fact, we had a lot of questions on the session that we presented at Nacha. So please put your questions in there, and you can poll and vote on what questions want to be prioritized through there. So that's the housekeeping, I guess, out of the way. Now, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you, Elizabeth, to your first webinar with Zepto. And it's just great to have you here. You and I have known each other for a couple of years now. But just before we do get started on the topic today, do you want to just give everyone a little bit of background about you and Glenbrook?
Yeah, it's so fun to join in. We had a great conference last week, and it's going to be exciting to share it. I'm one of the partners at Glenbrook Partners. It's a consulting strategy firm focused entirely on payments, right? All the different payment types and different stakeholders. Glenbrook is also a bit unique among its, brethren in that we focus a lot on merchant payments. So I think, it gives us much more in common here. And I lead the global practice, which is largely about instant payments all the time these days. That's the major focus, and work globally for our clients, mostly a lot in Africa and Latin America these days. And before Glenbrook, which has been around 12 years, I spent 15 years in Federal Reserve Financial Services. Well, most of it in financial services. Thanks.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you here. And I will shout out to you. Like, you are one of the most respected people in the ecosystem over in the US. So very well deserved. And I'm just excited about what we're going to talk about today. So again, I guess the balance of what we want to bring today to the audience is to really go and sort of represent a little bit about what Nacha is and this the conference that we're at, and also just talk a little bit about, I guess, what's unique about the US and the market there, and how we're thinking about, in contrast to what most of our audience would be aware of in terms of the Aussie ecosystem. But before we get into that, I just thought it's probably worth, the conference itself every year, it's called the Nacha Smarter Faster Payments Smarter Faster Payments Conference. It sort of runs for 4 days. This year it was in Miami, and it really does become, I guess, the epicenter in the US around payment conversation. And, the ACH, or the Automated Clearinghouse Network in the US, is very similar to what we've got in Australia in terms of the direct debit and direct credit system, of BECS, but it's just on a way different scale. I mean, in 2023, I just brought the stats up here, there were 31.5 billion ACH network payments that were valued at $80 trillion. Like, that dwarfs even our entire non-cash payment ecosystem in Australia by a factor of 5 to 10, depending on whether it's volume or value. So just this one payment rail is just so incredibly significant. And before we sort of get into the actual conference itself, I thought it would be really useful if you could just frame for the audience, and you did this in the presentation we did, but just some of the trends that are sort of starting to emerge in the US, because it is very different, like cash and checks even, very different to what we've got here. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in a very interesting, I think, transition point where we have our very established, ultra efficient payment systems like ACH, and Nacha's this was the 50th anniversary of the founding of the ACH as a payment scheme in the United States. And it's kind of interesting. And I didn't share this last week, but a lot of parallels with instant payments in the US. And when I was at the Federal Reserve, we used to sit around the lunch table, and those who had been there longer would tell the stories about the first days of ACH in the United States. They were literally traveling to banks 50 years ago to beg them to become receivers. All right. Because this was just all new and, ANSI formats. It was just wild and crazy in a way. And it wasn't until the U.S. Treasury said it was going to start using the ACH for some of its payments and ultimately Social Security, that banks really started to get interested. And of course, now it's 50 years old and it's connected to everything in the United States. And because of that, and its efficiency, we're not talking about retiring our ACH at all. In fact, it's getting even more vibrant with the relatively recent addition of same-day ACH. And it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke, but it's also a true statement that the most popular faster payment in the United States is same-day ACH, right?
Yeah.
Because they have volume.
Yeah, and that really connected with me. We're talking about the decommissioning of our BEC system into 2030 because it's still quite it's batch driven. It takes 2 days, all these things. But over in the States, it's that same day ACH is so critically important, and it gives another dimension to extending the life. Well, right now indefinitely, because there is so much value in terms of knowing that there is. It's coming the same day. You're not waiting 48 hours to get that confirmation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're just going to embark on an additional discussion that will help same day ACH as well as other payment systems, but moving this Federal Reserve settlement cycle to near 24/7.
Yes.
And that will allow an additional same day ACH window. So that would be 4, every 6 hours you can get and
that would 365 days a year as well.
That's the potential proposal. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredibly valuable. And I think that's part of I look at this and think, okay, there are use cases that don't need anything more than that. That is perfectly satisfactory in terms of where it's at. What about the trend in cash? And I think the thing that continues to blow my mind that Mark Gould, the head of payments for Fed, talked about was $9 trillion of checks still in circulation in the US.
Yeah, we do still have checks. I might admit to writing one recently myself. So to pay for some healthcare services. And, they're pretty big in corporate America. Yeah. But on a day-to-day basis, they're not so widely used for consumer purchases or just, paying someone. Because obviously we have a number of digital apps and now Zelle that really solve that need for consumers. But that's new too, PayPal's been around for a while, but, then Venmo and now Zelle, they're here to stay as well, right?
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more, I think, about both of those pieces, because I think part of the thing that becomes really clear when you're in the States is the peer-to-peer aspect of instant is sort of prolific. It's embedded. Everyone can Zelle or Venmo, but as you just said, the experience to large business or corporate is still driven by check in many, many cases, which again is it's not consistent with, and there's a willingness, I guess. But bringing it back to the conference, again, this was my first Nacha. I don't know, how many have you been to? You've been to a few.
Probably 20 over the years.
Which is great. But what I loved about it was that they broke it down into essentially 9 streams over the 4 days. The streams were quite unique. I've just written a couple down here. There was an ACH stream, there was a compliance and regulations stream, cyber and risk, disruptive ideas, faster payments, payments in practice, practical strategy, small to large business perspective, and then smarter payment experiences. So you could really distill it down into some key sort of core themes that were coming through. And to give a little bit of context again to who goes to this, it's very much skewed to the payment ecosystem, less about investors looking at opportunities, but there are banks, the schemes, the infrastructure providers, there are fintechs, there are regulators, central bankers, corporates. So it is really the stakeholders of the US payment ecosystem that are there talking, sharing, networking, and it's exciting. It really is. To be in a room and see at these events, what progress is being made, what potential apprehension there is or anxiety about some of these things, and the challenges there. But it's just great to see every year such a huge amount of the American payment ecosystem come together to talk about how to bring a better outcome for the economy and constituents and consumers.
It's great that was apparent to you. I also think that the organizers of the conference not only do a fabulous idea bringing these intersections together. It's not just ACH, because obviously it's much more for the users and the banks. And they've also, I think, done a really good job at trying to expand the focus so it's meaningful to more constituents. Even 10 years ago, I don't think you would have found a fintech at Nacha.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the case. I remember just a couple of years ago when we first met at the US Faster Payments Council, there was not that many fintechs even 2 to 3 years ago. Now, it's just there are so many, there's so much engagement now that there's availability, which probably leads into the next thing I wanted to sort of mention is this for us, for Zepto, and we're firmly in the account to account space and instant and real time. That's what I guess the appeal to us is as we look to the US with an intent that at some point we want to take our technology and be able to enable and support businesses in the US. Could you give us a little bit of an overview of how to think about the rail? There's not a single rail for real-time payment. And again, we've sort of just talked about ACH and same day ACH as being quite relevant to in Australia. If you wanted that, you're not going through the traditional direct entry. There is certain elements you could approach, or you could go through instant. But could you give us a little bit of context about the real-time payment rails that complement that?
Yeah, that is such a fascinating way that things have evolved here. Maybe 5 years ago, we started with the first instant payment rail, that it was, national open loop for all the banks. And of course, you can put the digital wallets in a different bucket. They're instant, right? Cards are instant in many regards as well. So we have the clearinghouse, which is the bank-owned association of payment services. They provide payment services. They have a wire system, they have a check clearing, and they also have an ACH. And they stood up the first instant payment system, and they called it RTP. It's new. There was no mandate. And we all it's ISO based. That was also a big difference. So people had to sort of, or the institutions had to sort of, find their place within it. But yet without a mandate, there's also not a instant, well, pardon the pun, there's not a simultaneous receiver network, right? Yeah. So it's this whole chicken and egg thing that we're still actually in, and then enter.
Just on that point, just to make it clear to the audience, when you say mandate, like government mandate or central bank mandate, to say that all banks need to engage and become, connected for real-time payment connectivity. So in the States right now, if you're a bank, and there are 9,000 banks out there, it is optional for you in the context of the community or your customers, whether or not you want to technically build out the functionality to provide real-time payments, and in this case, RTP capability from your bank. Yeah. So very different to Australia, where it was mandated and all the banks now have to be engaged in MPP, and we've got accessibility to bank accounts, call it 95%. That is obviously not the case in the States.
Yeah. You could, I mean, and it's often argued that the financial institutions that are on RTP are the largest, right? And so you have reach into more consumer and business bank accounts. I think that's a little bit of an overstatement because, maybe not all of those accounts are being allowed to receive these transactions or certainly send one. So it's much more of a jumble right now, the puzzle we're trying to fit together. And actually, at the same time they formed RTP, it's really around that time that we also got Zelle, which is virtually owned by the same group of financial institutions that own the clearinghouse. And Zelle was really focused on just the P2P use case. It's starting to move into business transactions now with a sister network called Pays, but some of the same things. And a big differentiator between RTP and Zelle is that Zelle has a directory of all the financial institutions and their clients, right? So
Yes.
I can send you a transfer just with your mobile or email number.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that has like a confirmation of payee. Does that have like a confirmation of payee to who you're sending it to within that?
I believe it does, but I'm actually not 100% positive. My credit union only recently got Zelle, so I'm not a terribly experienced user. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we heard that TCH, just to put it in context, now has 600 bank participants, or 600-ish. So you think again, just 9,000 odd financial institutions, community banks, etc. So 600 now are connected into there. And I was also reading, to your point, that the largest banks have got that footprint. And I think on paper they represent circa 70 to 75% of all bank accounts, like retail bank accounts in the US. So on paper, it's not bad, but the practicality of making a payment as a merchant or as a business via TP wouldn't get you 100%. And so that's part of that. And what about FedNow as an alternative? When did that come in, and how do we think about that relative to RTP?
Yeah, I think that 4.5 years after RTP was launched, we get FedNow. Of course, we saw it coming for quite a while, but then July of last year, they came into the market, and because it is an additional instant payment rail, and we currently have no interoperability between them, it's kind of the same process again, right? So you have to join Fed, just like you joined RTP or Zelle, and you have to find your connectivity and your use cases. It's a real challenge for the financial institutions. So it's another reason I think that it's going more slowly than you might otherwise imagine.
Yeah, I think there's a question just come through, which I'll sort of present in a sec. But what is interesting is that the tail, like you've got the big banks, these 600 odd that are on the clearinghouse, and then you've got the 8,400 other banks that make up the tail. There was a reluctance, at least from what I was seeing, for those banks to all sort of pile in to be under the ownership or using a rail that was owned by these bigger banks. So FedNow's come up and is accessible to everyone, right? So the idea being that the tail can start to engage here. And I think FedNow, 730 odd institutions connected into FedNow now. So it's there's still a lot of work to be done. But the question that's just come through here talks about, interoperability is key in terms of driving adoption and awareness. That absolutely is the case. And that question came up front and center, didn't it, in that keynote discussion on stage where you had the head of Federal Reserve, Mark Gould, and FedNow, and David, the head of the clearinghouse. Clearinghouse seemed to be a little bit more open to progressing interoperability, and the Fed more like, let's just see how it goes. But look at ACH. There is complete interoperability, and how amazing that is in terms of the reach and the volume now. Any thoughts there?
That's the $64 million question that for the U.S. What is this going to look like? Will there be some sort of interoperability ultimately between the two networks, or are we going to just continue as we are. And, I think the sort of thinking goes back and forth practically in the sense that, we have technical interoperability today because you basically are, you're in both or three systems if you want to count Zelle. So that's how you reach interoperability. But then, it still doesn't do anything about the ultimate receiver network, right? We need some sort of incentive to grow that on either or both networks. That's going to be our real challenge moving forward, because you can't really grow the volumes and scale the use cases on the network unless you have many more active receivers. I mean, why bring your senders over when you have other very good options?
Yeah, completely. And I think this is the challenge, right, of implementing a new rail, a new payment capability. It does take time. It's going to take time to build, not only the awareness and the adoption, but to really understand where's the application here and what certain use cases. We had an amazing session, like in terms of, we talked about faster commerce and the application of faster payments. The idea was to sort of showcase Pay2 to the American audience of what's happening elsewhere in the world. But Pay by Bank is starting to get, like, there was a lot of sessions around Pay by Bank more broadly. Like I saw another one that was Bank of America and a group called Banked. And Banked is well known in Australia because they've recently partnered with NAB. They were really polished in terms of what they present. It just feels like there is, momentum around Pay by Bank, but at the same time, the application to deliver that at the moment is either being done by, I guess, same day ACH, where the provider is sort of guaranteeing the payment to the merchant, or because there's not the ability, like in Australia, for the merchant to initiate in real time. So can you give us a little bit of, what are you thinking about that? Like, what was your takeaway at the end of the conference around Pay by Bank?
I do agree that there was a lot of interest and some good panels on that. I think it's a great solution for the market to sort of take traction. But again, where we are, a lot of them are still relying on ACH, not even same day ACH. I mean, I'm not exactly sure about the Bank of America banked partnership, but others are using actual next day ACH to settle these sorts of transactions. And then I think the additional challenge for scaling this will be that the Bank of America solution is going to look different than the Wells Fargo solution.
Yes.
Because we don't have a scheme around it. There are some discussions about that, but they're pretty initial.
Nascent. Yeah, exactly. I think, I was looking into this as well. That absolutely, there's variability in terms of what products brought. And I think there is other things at the moment where obviously open banking in the States is evolving, where you can connect your bank account as part of a transaction. At that point, the fintech can look into your bank account and basically determine, do you have the funds? How long are those funds? What's been the average balance of the account? And they can then guarantee the payment to the merchant. And maybe it does take 2 days, but at least the merchant has the comfort, the confidence of knowing that the funds are coming. But again, very different to the application in Australia, where the money is actually moving like within 2 seconds sort of thing. So it is different. But again, it was encouraging, at least from where I was sitting, to see so much interest. And you even said that our session had probably more questions than the normal, like in terms of the audience participation. That was, I thought actually, as we we're going through it, we weren't going to get through the actual presentation because there were so many questions coming at us.
I think our session was indicative in this, that clearly we're waking up to possibilities, and we're seeing what can be done. And, my motivation in, proposing this and dragging you so far away was to really highlight what can be done, right? Because right now we're struggling still for use cases and similar user experiences. And of course, you guys in Australia and other markets that have overlays or schemes on faster payments, you've put so much initial effort into it that, it comes out much more seamlessly when it gets going.
Yeah, and again, it's taken time. And I think even the evolution of Zepto over that, like we were heavy subscribers to early adopters, lending, some of just the payout capability. And that's what we're seeing in the US. Like there's a lot of panels on earned wage access. Do you mean to get gig workers paid quickly? But we're trying to drive, I guess, a greater awareness of the application of mainstream enterprise use case. Like we partnered with a company here, Ozedi, around the superannuation collection and disbursement. And we're still trying to now think about what is this next generation of where we can really leverage the value of real-time payments in a more mature way than just some of these early adopter use cases. And I think we're 5 years in and we're still pushing through it. So the US has a way to go, but I think part of the value that I see is that we're learning a lot here that we can come and influence. And I was talking to a couple of people about 401k, which is the superannuation pension, and like their eyes lit up about, well, that actually is something that is there's a lot of friction in the States. So there's application there. But you just mentioned about, sorry,
as a small business owner, I experienced the friction of getting money from, either from the company or from the employees into the, the provider of the accounts.
Yes.
It's a mess.
It's a mess. Yeah. So one of the things that got me quite excited, and this was like a light, bold moment. It shouldn't have been, but because we talk a lot, and when the MPP took off here, it was the idea of having an ISO 20022 sort of framework to go with the payment. And so just so everyone knows what ISO 20022 is, it's like the standard for the data and the framework that goes with the payment. It's a much richer data set than historically you could attach to a payment. Now, in the US, ACH is still not ISO 20022, but FedNow and the others are. So it's is TCH ISO 20022? Yeah.
Yes.
So the idea now is like, how do we start to bring that into the discussion when we think about the future? Because attaching a greater sense of data, it's not about just attaching an invoice or attaching this, but how do we link this into some of the challenges we're having at the moment around fraud and scam and transaction monitoring and being able to leverage AI with this data, this richer data set? I think there is incredible opportunity here, but no one, like it's not front and center in the discussion in Australia. And it was interesting to start to see it emerge at Nacha.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. And AI is moving so fast in terms of, what the options are, certainly in the financial services sector, that maybe that will help drive us forward and using, instant payments more because, with our same day ACH, it's still EDI based effectively, right? It has very limited capability. And of course, challenges around how you're exchanging the information there as well. But we haven't even begun to tap that. And another little detail on the US is that even though the networks are ISO based and the transactions go into the network and come out of the network in ISO, every financial institution doesn't have to generate its own ISO files. Processor may be doing that for them unless they're a very large bank.
Yes. And because that was another part of the discussion, wasn't it? Like people sort of getting ISO ready. Is that, but that's not being mandated though, is it? Because like there's a lot of for people to get ISO ready and they should be doing it. That's just still an optional. We think you should be doing it because it benefits you, not that you have to.
Yeah. And I think corporate customers are very aware of what's happening in the payment system, and they're pushing, their banks to do more. Of course, many of them aren't fully ready either, but they'd like to be. And Glenbrook did some research for the Faster Payments Council, where we talked to corporate treasurers who basically are big users of the ACH today. And, what are your interests in instant payments, and what would it take for you to transition some of these transactions? And they're all extremely interested. But one of their challenges is that, their ERP systems and, whether they're a biller or a treasurer, et cetera, they're not updated for ISO either. So we're in for a prolonged transition.
Yes. We're starting to get a taste of that in
Okay.
the idea of this transition into 2030 with the Beck's retirement.
Mm-hmm.
You break that down, that's only like 65 months. And again, we're getting into that whole thing, the ERP, the billing, like how do we break this apart? They're so deeply integrated here. Yeah, but I think I was really encouraged to be sort of challenged on the ISO piece in terms of my thinking, because I do think that this is something that if the world starts to adopt this, it can go nicely into the way that the payment ecosystem evolves in the US. The ACH CEO sort of said at the time, she put it up that she's waiting for their members to basically say that they want it, as opposed to enforcing it and putting it out. And I think that's fine, but people don't know what they don't know. Like, it's hard to get your head around, well, what is the benefit from doing this work to get here? We would like to see some, what is the value? So I feel, I'm focused on trying to bring that back to here now and start to think about what are the use cases that we can leverage that data richness for to do more on the other side. So it'll be interesting. I've put here, and this was fascinating to me as well. Like, so in Australia, the MPP, it's a member network. It's a scheme, but it's sort of represented by the banks as at a member level. The opportunity to access the MPP is it's meant to be an open access model. So you're a direct participant, you can initiate payments, but you can clear and settle. You're an identified institution, means you're proxying in via a direct participant. And there's a third license, which is connected institution, which enables those connected institutions to initiate, but still needs a partner to clear and settle. Yeah. Now, in the US, what I found fascinating, I didn't realize this, but just recently there's a couple of fintechs that have now connected directly into the Fed now, but need to be sponsored by a bank. Can you give us a little bit more color on that? Because that is really, really interesting.
Yeah, so we still are very traditional in our interpretation of what a financial institution is. And that's a legal definition as well. In fact, the Federal Reserve statute actually limits its financial services provision to banks or financial institutions. So, directly, Zepto or Glenbrook cannot be clients of the Federal Reserve Financial Services. And the clearinghouse, which runs these parallel networks, has taken a very similar position, right? We don't have connected institutions per se. We don't have payment institutions or a concept of digital bank in a regulatory sense. They're still kind of payment services providers. In fact, that's what the Federal Reserve calls them. But they can still play very important roles, but they just do so at the collaboration of a financial institution. So you have to have a sponsorship, which is inviting you into the network, as well as, that's who the Federal Reserve holds, or the clearinghouse holds responsible for the activities, right? Because otherwise they don't have any relationship with a payment services provider. But even, Fiserv and FIS, they're all payment services providers to the Federal Reserve. That's how they're connected to the Fed. It's not something new. It's just something that hasn't really been widely scaled.
Yeah, because I guess the level of governance required to get a bank to sponsor you is bank-like. So, yes, so just so I'm clear, that enables you to technically connect into the Fed to initiate, and then that bank that sponsored you would then clear and settle the payments on your behalf, I'm assuming.
Well, that's not a requirement. That is I guess an implication, and it often does that way. But, if Glenbrook were a payment service provider, we could have one bank that we use to sponsor us into the network, and who we actually, we're their client in this sense, because they're paying our bills in the network, right? Yes. Right. So they're paying our connectivity bills, et cetera. Yes. And but we may work with other financial institutions for
Yes.
clearing or settlement.
Yeah.
They don't have to settle your transactions.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. But I guess the point noted here for some of the like one of the fintechs that recently connected, a US fintech, they would still need, they couldn't clear and settle directly themselves. They would still need a bank to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's incredible. Like, that's cool. And we also sort of referenced, we got a lot of respect for Adyen. And I saw that recently they've got a bank branch, I think, in the States that enabled them to go directly as well. So there is a lot of movement here. And I think there is a lot, if you look at the latest news around advocacy for greater engagement or the ability to access as non-banks. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon in the US, but there's real value here for driving competition for pricing services and greater efficiency. But as it is in Australia, we just that can't be inconsistent with managing risk and stability of the financial ecosystem. So those things need to be in check. In fact, we're like Zepto, we've met the Federal Reserve team a number of times, and just being able to, they're very interested in like how that works in Australia, where we're connecting in, like what licensing do we have, what governance do we have, the cyber and information controls that we have. So there's a lot in there, and it's not easy. So, but that was a really an eye opener for me, though, the ability to connect in, because that provides, well, especially as a tech company, provides you greater visibility and transparency over what's happening. You're not relying on a third party to relay anything. It's great when it's going well, but when things don't go well, proximity to the rail is so critically important to be able to communicate the status of what's going on.
Absolutely.
So we're getting close to time here. I was going to say we should share what we thought was our favorite session from Nacha. Like, I really enjoyed it. We're definitely going to be there next year. I think it's New Orleans next year in April. But hopefully you don't steal my thunder with what I thought was the best session, but because then we're going to be in trouble. But I will pass it to you to go first, because I'd love to hear what you thought was your best session.
Well, I had a few that I thought were insightful, as well as just, I'm learning things. And one of them was actually an executive session. They had these series where, leaders talk, and we had someone from Cross River and, oh my gosh, I'm blanking right now. I think it was Stripe.
Right, okay.
And they had a real exchange of, what the financial institution does, what the payment service provider does, and how they can collaborate together. And of course, they're all working under the existing rules, but have really figured out how to maximize that within each of their own ecosystems. And how the discussion was also focused on how instant payments can bring value to someone like Stripe, for example. Of course, They get it through their financial institution. So that was a new series that Nacha had, and I thought that one was super interesting.
Yeah. Well, Cross River, I think it's Keith Van der Leest who runs, like, he's an incredible guy. He's got a lot of insight. Like, they'd be one of the biggest sort of supporters of the fintech community in terms of a bank that enables access. And they do a huge amount of the volume of real-time payments, I guess, at the moment. I know they power Trustly, they power a number of different companies in the US and do really well. I think Stripe as well, like, I don't know if you saw John Collison's Stripe sessions the other week, where it's sort of like he talks about some of the I guess, inspiration for what's happening around the world. But I think his first point on that was the proliferation of real-time payments globally is just, it's big. It's really big. And that sort of links through actually to my favorite session, which was the one, would you believe, it's like the last session of the entire conference, which was like, I think 11 o'clock on the Thursday, expecting no one to be there, but there was a lot of people there. Peter Tapling was moderating, and forget his name, the founder of this. I'm just sort of looking it up, whether I've got it. But basically,
it was Carlos Neto from Matera.
Yes, exactly. So he's the founder of Matera. And so just for everyone here, Matera is a Brazilian fintech. And it really looked at like Pix. We all talk about Pix as being an incredible use case on the adoption of real-time payments. And it is for a number of reasons. Not only is it around financial inclusion, but you had a heavy concentration of card usage in Brazil as well. And now just I guess just the scale at which this is moving. So Matera is, I think, the largest or the third largest processor of Pix payments. They do 375 million Pix payments per month. Like, it is crazy. And 75 million of those were driven by QR. And so he talked about how this moved. Now, Brazil, again, they mandated that every bank needed to be Pix enabled, which is great. And that's really pushed on. But he talked about the importance of the wallet and the lack of variability, like the consistency in how it's approached, and like how that's continued to drive, and it's just continued to grow. And as a fintech or a tech provider in this ecosystem that does, I think, circa 10% of all Pix volume going through his wallets, he really went deep into the importance, and this really connected with the way that we're operating here, the importance of resilience, reliability to scale. Like, because even when he was talking, these numbers are probably a little bit out of date. Like, I think we're doing 50 more million a month than what we were saying here. And so the speed at which this is moving and the scale to deliver a technology that's reliable is incredibly difficult. And he just shared a lot of that. So Matera, M-A-T-E-R-A, for the audience to look up. Fascinating conversation. I could have listened to him talk for a lot longer.
Yeah, they're super advocates of Pix and what it can also, we can learn from it here in the U.S. And of course, they're very active in Brazil. Of course, I've been in their office and they've actually, done Pix transactions in front of me and taken all these pictures. And, to this point about consistent user experience, I have a C6 account in Brazil, just for a digital bank. And Pix is required to come up on the home screen of my app on the first screen. Whereas, my credit union still buries Zelle on 6, menus deep. And I found it by accident. They didn't even advertise it, right? So, but this is required in the Pix rules that be there. And of course, how the payment flows is also a requirement. The user experience, they were super thoughtful when they planned this out.
I think that's one thing in Australia we probably retrospectively should have done, is mandated a better, presentation of, in particular, now we're going with Pay 2, this, variability of where to find it, how it's presented, what it is. We've still got a lot of work to do here. So just in winding up here, is there anything else that we've missed? That's sort of what sort of stood out to me, but was, like you said, there's a couple. Was there anything else that is worth shouting out?
Well, I've talked very candidly about our, challenges in the U.S., but we're also an incredible financial services ecosystem with lots of different players. And I think, just the conversations around, if you will, open banking, pay by bank, and, commerce initiation. It was very inspiring for me to think that, yes, we're going to get there. And I so thank you for sharing that with, 100+ people at the conference last week, because it really was the most engaged, large audience that I've ever seen at Nacha. And I've been to a number of them.
No, it was good. We're passionate, right? We're passionate about what we're building. We're passionate about how we discuss it. I just look forward, and we are pioneering this new future. And it is exciting, but we have to advocate for what does good look like as well. It's not just driving technology for the sake of it. It's we have to find an application that adds value and enables, a better customer experience, a better way to pay. So all of that makes sense. Just the other thing that I'd just reference there, to your point, I think the US is the most exciting market when it comes to this. It is disparate, it is hard, it's disjointed. You've still got checks in circulation, which, by the way, we didn't talk about fraud and scam, The greatest amount of fraud and scam at the moment is residing in checks. It's funny, like when I say it's funny, it's not funny, but in contrast to real-time payments, we're not seeing the scale of fraud and scam in real-time payments because there's so much opportunity for the fraudsters to pull apart checks. So there's great value in terms of bringing some of this technology to market that really benefits, some of the existing problems in the US. So but look, we're at time. I just wanted to say a massive thank you. Thank you for putting the topic up to Nacha. It was exciting to get accepted to present. We presented on day one. We had great engagement. But look, I really appreciate you joining today. We've got to do this again after Nacha next year and share what developments after 12 months. And thanks everyone for joining in.
Thanks for having me today.
Thanks, Elizabeth. See you soon.
Bye.